Hey guys, it's Saga from TecworkZ, and this is my detailed camera review of the Samsung Galaxy M51. I'm really surprised with the cameras on this phone. Turns out, using a Sony sensor and a Snapdragon processor instead of their own did the trick for Samsung. If you guys want to watch this video in Hindi, you can click on this card that appears on the top right corner of your screen or on the link in the description section. A lot of you guys requested me, so I finally made a Hindi channel. So if you guys understand Hindi, click on the link in the description, come say hi on that channel and show your love and support by hitting the subscribe button. Alright, we have over 80 image and video samples including the ones from Gcam to look at, so without wasting any more time, let us check out the cameras that we are working with. Primary camera gets a 64 megapixel Sony IMX682 sensor with f1.8 aperture and a 26mm lens. Then there is a 12 megapixel sensor with f2.2 aperture and an ultra wide angle lens, followed by a 5 megapixel macro camera with f2.4 aperture and another 5 megapixel camera with a depth sensor and f2.4 aperture. At the front, there is a 32 megapixel sensor with f2.0 aperture and a 26mm lens in an Infinity O style camera cutout. It's good to see Samsung going with the Sony sensor for the primary camera and ditching the 2 megapixel macro camera in favor of a 5 megapixel one. Camera interface is pretty basic. You can tap on these buttons above the shutter button to switch between lenses, or you can swipe to the left or right to switch between modes. There are a few more modes in this More tab, and if you want, you can pull these modes out of the More tab as well. In the Pro mode, you can adjust settings like ISO, shutter speed, focus, white balance and exposure. And you can even create specific picture profiles by adjusting these settings. There is however no option to switch lenses or shoot raw images in this Pro mode. With all of that out of the way, let us now move on to the image and video samples that I took with this phone. This time, let us start with the videos first. 4K 30fps videos turned out to be pretty stable. I was walking at a normal pace and we can barely see any major stutters due to the footsteps. Even for the 4K videos, colors are not too saturated, which is good. 1080p 30fps videos are also stable, but switching between the 4K and 1080p ones, you can straight away tell that things are not as detailed as they were. But all in all, I think the videos from this phone are pretty usable. Now no matter if you are shooting 4K or 1080p videos, 30fps is the highest frame rate that you get. There is just no option to shoot 60fps videos. You get to shoot slow motion videos, but all of these are in 720p resolution. If you are shooting slow motion videos, just make sure to shoot them outside in bright light, because if you shoot them indoors, there will be a lot of noise and flickering in them. You can also take super slow motion videos, and these are again in 720p resolution. The window to shoot this video is so small that you might have to take multiple attempts to shoot the main action in super slow motion. Coming to the images, let us start with the ones that I took in daytime first. These 16 megapixel pixel binned images from the Sony sensor are incredibly detailed. Everything is sharp and detailed and the images look really good. Now there is some noise in the darker parts if you click these images in overcast conditions, but that is to be expected out of any phone. Other than that, I am pleasantly surprised with the main camera on this phone. Even as I zoom in, you can see the image holds on to its details. We all thought that the M51 is a bit overpriced, and in some ways it really is. But at a starting price of 25,000 rupees, this phone can give the cameras on the OnePlus Nord a really tough competition. Here I am comparing two images side by side. One is shot with the native camera app and the other with the Gcam. As you can see, one with the Gcam has a lot of contrast, whereas the one from the stock camera app looks much better overall. Now if I zoom in, we can see that the stock camera's image is also more detailed. We see a similar thing in the next set of images as well. So for most of the outdoor daytime images, you don't even need to use the Gcam app on this phone. Stock camera can take better looking and more detailed images than that. Even while clicking images indoors, the main camera on the M51 performs really well. It works really hard to keep the noise levels to a minimum. Now the colors from any Samsung smartphones have always been more vibrant and punchy compared to the actual scene. While that is still true with the M51, Samsung seems to have toned it down a bit on the saturation front. These images are not as overly saturated as one might expect, and that is a good thing. Overall, color tones are a bit cooler compared to the ones from the other phones. When comparing these images with the ones from Gcam, it shows us that the colors are actually still far from how the scene actually looked. But for a change, I think I am happy with the colors that are coming out of the Samsung's native camera app. I have kept the HDR mode on auto for all of my shots. This mode does a good job and it comes up when the situation demands it, like in this shot. It brings up shadows and saves the highlight from being blown out, but it doesn't do too much to make these images look overprocessed. Now if you remember, I had the exact opposite problem with the M31. It did too much processing and made the shot look unnatural. So I guess Samsung is listening and they have mellowed down the HDR mode to make the images look better but more natural. In these high dynamic range situations, you can use the Gcam app to get even better results. So while the stock camera is giving us good images, Gcam is doing slightly better. It brings up more details from the shadows. Gcam's images are a bit warmer and the stock camera ones are cooler. Depending on your color preference, you might like one over the other and that is completely fine. But dynamic range wise, Gcam is definitely better. Here is a quick focusing speed test before we move on to the close-up and macro shots. M51 is not exactly the fastest at switching the focus. It takes little over half a second, but the shift in focus is not abrupt. It tries to rack the focus in and out. Once the focus is set, you can take amazing close-up shots. The subject that you tap on the one closest to the camera is in perfect sharp focus and the background is very nicely blurred out. Sometimes it is really hard to believe that these images are coming out of a smartphone. They look that good. Yes, there is some distortion if you get too close to your subject, but that is present on all smartphones with a bigger image sensor. To get rid of this, just move a few inches away from your subject. Now Samsung has put a 5 megapixel macro camera on the M51, and to put it simply, this one is not completely useless. I mean, you would still not get the best macro shots if you are shooting indoors, but in broad daylight, these macro shots can look really good. It still doesn't let you tap to focus, so you will have to rely on your eyes to figure out if the subject is in perfect focus or not. But the resulting macro shots are totally acceptable and usable. The colors are a bit muted or washed out though. As I say in all my videos, you can take 2 or 3 times zoomed in images with the main camera and try to mimic the macro shot. Here are those and macro shots compared side by side. You can look at them and decide for yourself that which ones look better to you. I mentioned at the start that all the images from the primary camera are 16 megapixel pixel bin ones. But if you want, this one lets you take 64 megapixel images as well, and we will see how they compare against the 16 megapixel ones. But before that, let me show you guys how you can take the 64 megapixel images. When you are in the photo mode, tap on this option at the top which says 4:3 or 3:4 depending on how you are holding the phone, and then select the 64 megapixel option. So here are 16 and 64 megapixel images compared side by side. Straight up, you can barely tell any difference between the two. But when I zoom in on them, it is clear that the 64 megapixel one is capturing so much more details. As we move to comparing other images, it is quickly apparent that the 64 megapixel mode doesn't show as good dynamic range as the 16 megapixel mode. But still, the details are much more in the 64 megapixel shots. The 64 megapixel mode also doesn't do very well in lower light. There is just too much noise in those shots. So both 16 and 64 megapixel images have their pros and cons. One major con of the 64 megapixel shot is that these images are 4 to 5 times larger in terms of file size. On top of that, you have to zoom in 4 to 5 times to see any noticeable difference, which is not worth the hassle. So I think it is best if you stick to the default 16 megapixel mode for most of your shots. In normal scenarios, this is what you see from the main camera on the M51. But switching to the wide lens lets you see so much more of the scene from the same spot. This lens comes in very handy to show the perspective of the scene, or in situations when you need to capture a wider scene but there is no space to move back. Images from this wide camera are not as sharp or detailed as the ones from the main camera, because the lens optics in these cameras are simply not the best. Normally, there is a big shift in white balance and color temperature when we switch between the lenses on most mid-budget smartphones. But Samsung has managed to keep these things consistent between the lenses, so a big thumbs up to Samsung for that. Moving on to the portrait shots. Samsung seems to be getting everything right on this phone. Edge detection is near perfect, skin tones look really good, and with the skin smoothing turned off, the faces are not as smooth as before. So all in all, I'm very happy with the portrait mode performance of the M51. If anything, I just hope Samsung puts a lot of work in improving the dynamic range while taking these portrait shots, because any bright background is almost always blown out while taking these portrait shots. Portraits of objects also turned out to be very good. Now, most of the objects that I try and take portraits of have complex edges, but even then, edge detection while taking portraits of objects is always better while taking portraits of humans, and this is with all the phones, not just this one. Anyways, in the last video, I asked, do you guys also take portraits of objects with your phone? But I barely got any response to this question in the comments. So I ask again. Do you guys also take portraits of objects with your phone, or is it just me? With that, we now move on to the images shot in indoors, artificial and lower lighting conditions. This is the same sensor that we saw on the Realme 7 Pro in my last video, so just like it, M51 also doesn't have any problems while taking good images in artificial light. Overall size of the sensor is large, so it is capable of capturing more details, and the wide aperture makes sure it gets more light so the images are detailed and noise level is kept to a minimum. When you get to even lower light, you can keep on capturing decent images with the default mode or switch to the night mode and let the camera capture even better and sharper images. These night mode images are a bit zoomed in, so keep that in mind while composing your shot. Here are Gcam shots compared to the ones with the stock camera app. Gcam captures slightly better images and a bit less noise, and this gets even better with the night mode on Gcam turned on. But these results from the Gcam app are not very consistent in lower lighting conditions, and given that the difference between these images is not night and day, I decided to stick with the stock camera app for rest of my low light shots. You can use the night mode even if there is plenty of ambient light like in this shot. The night mode reduces the noise levels in the images, and it also handles the exposure from lights in a much better way. Just be aware that for taking good night mode shots, you have to hold the phone steady for a few seconds, and any movement during that time can result in a blurry looking shot. Again, as we saw on the Realme 7 Pro, night mode is available for the wide lens as well. Now you can capture wide shots in pitch dark as well, and the night mode will make sure that your images stand out. As I said at the start, I am really surprised with the camera performance of this phone. I did not expect it to be this good. Now this has got me just as excited as you guys to see how these cameras performs against the ones on the OnePlus Nord. So make sure you have the notifications turned on so you don't miss out when that video drops. That brings us to the front facing camera. The 32 megapixel selfie camera has a neat trick. Normally, it shoots in a tighter focal length, but if it detects multiple faces in the shot, it switches to the wide mode. The selfies from this phone are very sharp and detailed. You can see a bit of artificial sharpening at play here, but I don't think most people will be bothered by it. Now there is a beauty mode which is on by default, so if you want your selfies to be sharp and detailed, make sure to disable it beforehand. Low light selfies are good if there is some ambient light around, but the ones in complete darkness are filled with noise. You can turn on the night mode and add a bit of light to these selfies, but I would still prefer not taking images in such low light. While the portrait selfies look good overall, the edge detection for these is not perfect. There seems to be a hard line separating your face from the background instead of a soft roll-off. The phone also needs to detect a face for taking portrait selfies, so if you are wearing a mask like I was in this shot, it won't blur the background because it can't detect a face. Here's a video from the front-facing camera of the Samsung Galaxy M51. You can see how it handles the overall colors of the scene, exposure, and stabilization when I'm walking around with it. So with that, we have seen over 85 image and video samples, and you guys might have guessed it already that I am very happy with the camera performance of this phone. The only major things that I would like them to fix is the dynamic range while taking portraits and maybe refine the selfie camera a bit, and that's it. Even with these small issues, I think this phone can still go head to head with the likes of the OnePlus Nord in terms of cameras. Now these have been my thoughts about the cameras on the Samsung Galaxy M51. But you guys saw the images too, so what do you think about its cameras? Let me know in the comments. If you guys like these cameras and you want to purchase this phone for yourself, I will really appreciate if you get it from the affiliate link in the description section. That is it for this video guys. Please hit the like button if you enjoyed this video and subscribe to the channel for more quality tech videos like this. You can also check out some of the other videos from this channel. This has been Sagar, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take care.